Shalom Aleichem, a good night of Shabbos again. We are learning the second class on the Mamer, BiShalom Mikrovli, Kiberab Moyemadi, which the Rebbe said, Yutis Kislev and Tafshin Lamadal, 50 years ago this year. 50 years ago next Shabbos, to be exact. I divided the Mamer in half, not in the order which the Mamer was said and written, but in the order of topics as I'm teaching it. As I mentioned in the previous class, the fact that I'm a private operator and I'm teaching my modem that have been prepared by people who are empowered by the Rebbe, and they have a chazaka and they have skill at preparing the modem. If I rearrange a Mamer and you don't like my rearrangement, you can say, excuse me, this is how the Mamer was written, this is how the Mamer was said, this is the Hanocha, and that's the point. I can change the order of the Mamer because you're not going to be limited in how you understand the Mamer by my change, because you can always go back to the original and look at it, which is available in print and in audio and so on. So I'm allowing myself to restructure the Mamer by topics. And as I explained at length in the previous class, the Mamer is based on the Ranat and the Tadash, Tafresh and Tes, Tafshin Dalet. And in the previous class, we essentially chazed what's written in those Maimorim. That in life, there's a peace condition, there's a war condition, and there's an intermediate condition which is called Cherev Shel Shalom, a demonstration of strength which avoids the actual conflict. And then it explains this in Avodah, this is Torah, is Shalom, and Avodah is Cherev Shel Shalom, and Gemilas Chasadim is Milchama, and he explained each one why and how it is. And in life, we redeem ourselves, we develop our relationship with the Eibishter. We live our lives as Jewish people on one of these three levels. Either Torah, Gemilas Chasadim, or Avodah. This applies to our own personal lives, and it applies to influence on the world. Through Torah, we bring peace into the world. Through Avodah, we bring a struggle to bring peace into the world, but the struggle is in a safe environment. And through Gemilas Chasadim, we bring peace into the world by actually going out into the world and dealing with it. In other words, Torah has no shaychas to the Nefesh HaBahamis, and if it does, its shaychas to the Nefesh HaBahamis is that the Nefesh HaBahamis is included in it without it having a say. Tefillah is absolutely involving the Nefesh HaBahamis, but only the Nefesh HaBahamis. And Mitzvos involves not just the Nefesh HaBahamis, but the Guf and Chalkei Ba'olam. And like it says, Tanya Perek Lamed Hey, the Nefesh HaLakis cannot reach the world without the necessary intercession of the Nefesh HaBahamis. Now, in the course of that conversation, the Rebbe also threw in the Nefesh HaSichlis. The Nefesh HaLakis, Torah involves the Nefesh HaSichlis also. Tefillah, he spoke Be'ikir about the Nefesh HaLakis and the Nefesh HaBahamis. And Mitzvah, he said, Nefesh HaSichlis is not enough. You have to have Nefesh HaBahamis to do a physical thing. Torah avoiding Gemilas Chasadim. What we're going to do now is learn the other parts of the Mamer, and as I pointed out, they're all over. Going back to the first page, we're going to read the middle of the first paragraph. We have the number 9. Then all of the second paragraph, which is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And then we're going to go to the end of the Mamer and learn from 17 and on. What's going to happen in this class? Now, I didn't look up the Ranat, and I didn't look at Tashdal, but I learned them. So I think that what we're going to learn going forward is not in those Maimorim. This is the Rebbe's. The first half of this Mamer was, in quotes, a chazara, a brief review of those earlier Maimorim. And here the Rebbe's adding a new dimension. And the new dimension is that there's a possibility that all three avodas of Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chasadim should be Shalom. Even though on a simple level, Torah is Shalom, and Tefillah is Cherev Shel Shalom, and Mitzvahs like Gemilas Chasadim is Milchama, there's a level of Torah which affects that side the Torah, side the Avodah, side the Gemilas Chasadim, all the Madrega of Shalom. And what Madrega of that? That's the Madrega of Toraso Umnaso. If you learn Torah on the Madrega of Toraso Umnaso, everything becomes peaceful. And he's going to say it, and he's going to argue it, and he's going to prove it. And the beginning of it is the Pasuk. There's three avodas, Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chasadim. What's the order of those three? In the life of the person, it's Tefillah, Torah, Mitzvos. How come the Mamer begins, the pasuk begins with Torah, Pada BiShalom Nafshi? That's the question, Pada BiShalom. And the Rebbe uses that question to make the point that although there's three avodas, there's a higher madrege, where all three are done, a madrege of Torah, the madrege of Shalom, and that's where the pasuk begins with Pada BiShalom. So let's go. Number 9 on the first page. We just read Pada BiShalom Nafshi Mikra Rabbi Madi. And in the beginning of the Mamer, the Rebbe presented the Gemara with Rashi's help. That this includes Torah, Vedic, Mos Chasodim. Says the Rebbe, there's another madrege in there, Shul Pshute Shal Kosov, which is the simple reading of the pasuk, Shapadi BiShalom. The redemption is peaceful, period. There is a movement which indicates that although that we know from this pasuk that there's 3 levels of Padiyah. Padiyah b'shalom, Padiyah b'cherev shel shalom, Padiyah b'tech muchama. B'dugmas mashalem demei pasuk, which the pasuk gives us. The tzarach liyas mitad the adam anifta, which is connected to the person being redeemed. Gimel and yonim, which are gimel leifanim, or gimel avodah, kavin, of Torah, Mos Chasodim, and Tefilla, avodah. Says the Rabbi, al derech zayesh gam ba'pasuk de Pada BiShalom, which is why the pasuk Pada BiShalom includes all 3 Gimel and Yonim Shem Gimel Efani Aveda Benegel Adam Anifta. That the person being redeemed can be redeemed in the level of Shalom, Torah, the level of Cherev Shalom, Tefillah, and Lev Mechala, Mechama Gemilas Chasadim. However, there's another pshat. In Pirush Habeis Pasuk, at the second pshat in this pasuk, Shabdiya Hoisa Ba'ofen Shel Shalom. That the Padiyah is done in a peaceful way regarding all 3 Yonim of Torah, Aveda, and Gemilas Chasadim. In other words, the simple pshat in the pasuk, according to the Gemara, is that there's 3 levels of Padiyah. Torah, Aveda, Gemilas Chasadim, Shalom, Cherev Shalom, and Mechama. But there's another read in the pasuk, which is simpler, and if I had to use my words, I would say, if you don't learn the Gemara, that the Gemara inserts Torah, Aveda, Gemilas Chasadim. Just read the pasuk as it is, Pada BiShalom Nafshi Mikrav L'ki B'Rabim HaYemadi, which denotes that the entire pasuk is describing the inyan of Shalom. But it's describing the inyan of Shalom as it's going to ultimately come down into all 3 Avedas of Torah, Aveda, and Gemilas Chasadim. Go to the next paragraph and the number 10. And read the second word. Even though we have a pasuk, that when you read the pasuk by itself, it speaks only about Shalom. When you read the pasuk with the help of the Gemara, it speaks about 3 madreges, Torah, Aveda, Gemilas Chasadim, which is not just the 3 poles, but it's the 3 levels of Shalom and Cherev Shel Shalom and Melchama. However, since Haschalahi, the pasuk begins, if you start your life with Limud HaTorah first, and as you're going to see later on, your day starts with Tefillah. Why does the pasuk open with Torah? Because this means that your whole approach to life is Torah and Shalom. Once Torah is able to affect that Gamba Gemilas Chasadim, also when it's mitzvahs and it's stuck, and also in Mispal Lematzib is davening, Shiab Eifan, because all 3 of them should be on the Madrega of Shalom. And then Bedugmas Hamavua, like it's explained in many places in Chassidus, Bin B'chal Masayimana, that included in 200 is 100. In other words, even though there's 3 Madregas, Torah, Aveda, Gemilas Chasadim, Shalom, Cherev, Shalom, and Melchama, there's a possibility of having Shalom on a high Madrege, so that the other 2 Kavim of Tefillah and Gemilas Chasadim are also uplifted to the Madrega of Shalom. And because of this, when a Yid lives on a Madrega of Pada BiShalom, and then the redemption happens in actual fact, he BiShalom, he's redeemed in a peaceful way, meaning, but often on such a level, that's Lashon HaPasuk in B'chukaisai, that there's a concept of Cherev Shel Shalom, and Imru Chokesei Telechu means Torah Madrega of Chakika, which is consistent with Toraso Umnaso, which is consistent with the idea of the Pada BiShalom of Torah, making Shalom out of Tefillah and of Gemilas Chasadim. So then the sword of peace doesn't pass through your land. When it says the words Pada BiShalom, which is talking about Torah, but it's referring to the pasuk that even when it comes to the Madrega of Tefillah, and when it comes to Madrega of Gemilas Chasadim, the pasuk concludes, a sword shouldn't pass through your land, even a sword of peace. So although the pasuk with the help of the Gemara describes 3 wars and 3 redemptions on 3 levels, the overriding issue of the pasuk, the way the pasuk begins, BiShalom, going on Torah, can affect that the other 2 should also be raised up to Madreg of Shalom, as the Rebbe began this paragraph by saying, B'klal Masayim Mana, or it just said the pshat in the pasuk, V'cherev l'sava b'yartzach. And then the Rebbe continues and he says in the last words of page 45, now then, this also applies in Avedas Adam. As a person is permeated with Torah in the kind of way, that even later on, when he's involved in which means he's going out into the world, and he's involved with the Nefesh Bahamis and Gashmias directly. When he's davening, although he's not involved in the Gashmias of the world, he's involved with his Nefesh Bahamis, as the particulars of these ideas are explained in other places, and it was explained in the last year, because we learned ahead in this Mamer. It's a possibility that you could have the Torah transform his Tefillah and his Gemilas Chassadah to be Madreg of Torah as well. And he continues, number 13, it explains the sequence in the pasuk. The Gemara says, based on the pasuk, the first thing is Torah, and the second thing is Gemilas Chassadah, which means mitzvahs, and the third thing is which means Tefillah. Afapi, the Seder Avedas Adam b'meshech hayim, the actual living of a person is not like that. The first thing is Betchilu, when you're not Tefillah, first you daven, and that's put last. Then you learn Torah, which in the pasuk is first, and the Gemara is first. And only you have hanig behem minig derech, you have going out into the world and making derech, which is making parnasa and earning money and being mavaded the world and using the world for Avodas Hashem, like the Rabbi says, ani lo nevresi el l'shamash es keni, to take gashmis and make it into mitzvahs, which is connected to the Yinat Zdok. So the Rebbe's kasha is, if the Seder in life is Tefillah, Torah, Tzedakah shouldn't be the Seder in the pasuk. And instead the Seder is Torah, Tzedakah, Tefillah. And the answer is going to be, because although the Seder is Taka Tefillah, Torah, Tzedakah, but because there can be the overarching level of learning Torah that changes the Tefillah and the Tzedakah into BiShalom, not Cherev Shel Shalom, and for sure not Milchama, it has to be put first. And then the Rebbe goes off on a bracket. This bracket is quite long, and it's a Mamer Amuzgir. We just established, the Rebbe just told us, that in the practical life of a person, the Seder is Tefillah, Torah, and Mitzvahs. So he has 2 questions. Question number 1. On this statement of fact, that the Seder of a Yid's Avodah is Tefillah, Torah, Gemach, he asks 2 questions. Question number 1. Masha Masinu in Tzedakah kedem Tefillah. Isn't it true that he gives Tzedakah before davening? So then how could I, says the Rebbe, say that Tzedakah is after davening and after learning? Answers the Rebbe, Hari Ein Inyan Tzedakah. The Tzedakah we're given before davening is not Tzedakah as bitter of Gashmias. Ki Amarei Ze Inyan Tefillah, it's part of davening. B'chtei Sheyeh Be'even Shel Echaz Lefanecha, that the person, when he davens, should come to meet the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As the Gemara says, Rabbi Loza Yav Peruta Lo'oni V'hodem Matzah. First he gave tzedakah and then he davened, because he said, Ani b'tzedek echaz lefanecha. If I want to meet the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I have to give tzedakah first. In other words, Ika Bazeu echaz lefanecha of La'ein tzedakah. This tzedakah is davening, is meeting the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not tzedakah. So when you give tzedakah before davening, that's not tzedakah, it's a part of davening. And of course, you have to throw in the against HaKodsh, which we're going to be learning very soon in Chitas, in the next few days before Yitas Kislev. Utztaka kenachal eson, where the Alter Rebbe explains how a person is giving tzedakah for the sake of experiencing the eson sheba neshama, connecting to the Eibishter in tefillah. So the Rebbe says here, that's not tzedakah, that's tefillah. Question number 2. What about limit Torah before tefillah? If we're establishing as a fact that the Seder is tefillah, Torah, tzedakah, based on the Gemara, right? That's tefillah. Basic Kesses is the Beis HaMedrash, and then Beis HaMedrash Hari remembering the Recher, so they say this Tefillah Torah. Gmach. So the tzedakah before davening is a part of davening. What about the Torah we learn before davening? In fact, we learn Torah before we daven, says the Heilig Rebbe. The answer is Ikir in Yonad B'Shvila Tefillah. That learning is also davening. That it should be proper. Because the truth is that Ikir in Yonad Tefillah, Torah, the idea of Torah, the way it's done on a level of Ikir, is Kalashna Gemara b'Mesiyah Mesech the Brachas. The Gemara says the end of Brachas. You start off at the Beis HaKnesses, and the Beis HaKnesses, the Beis HaMedrash, first Tefillah, then Torah. So Mela, the Rebbe argues that we know in life, based on the Gemara, the end of Mesech the Brachas, that Mitasi Smucha l'Tfilose, and Beis HaKnesses is the Beis HaMedrash, and Mi Beis HaMedrash Hanig Behem, meaning that Acheres, that the Seder in a person's life is Tefillah, Torah, Tzedakah. So how come with this passage the Seder is Torah Gmach Tefillah? On the Kan Pirash, the reason here there's a different change is because the Hayes V'Zeko, since this is talking on the pasuk, Pada BiShalom, we're not talking about Stam, the different ways of serving the Eibishter, but the aspiration and the goal to achieve a level of serving Hashem which is called peaceable. And the Pashta, serving Hashem peaceably, is only Torah, and Tefillah's Cherev Shel Shalom, and Stok is God Milcham Alein, but on a different level, all three could be done BiShalom, and that's why the Palteil BiShalom is first. In this pasuk, Niski it's mentioned also Shas Choli Mikravli, that when a person lives his life, he begins with a battle, which is Milchama, which is Stalker. Or B'Meilish, so if there's an actual battle, then for sure there's the idea of Cherev Shalom, which is the demonstration of strength, which is in between war and peace. So in other words, you have in this pasuk Milas Chasadim, which is Milchama, you have in this pasuk Tefillah, which is Cherev Shel Shalom. And Afal Pekain Hatman Oiz Gifit. Nevertheless, we affect it. The pasuk should begin with Pada BiShalom, because there is an idea that you can accomplish that even in the other two avodas you could bring in Shalom B'Shleimus. And the Shalom B'Shleimus is then going to manifest into the fact that Afilu Cherev Shel Shalom Leitava Ba'atzechem, even a sword of peace is not going to pass through your land. And al derech zeh, when it comes to tzedakah and mitzvahs, you're going to do it in an eifin of shalom, not an eifin of milchama. And for this reason, this happens because haschala is called the asik b'teira. You start off your life by learning Torah, or to say it more precisely, you start off your life learning Torah on a madrega of asik. And this changes his gemilas chasadim und sein mispalel lematzi, but there should also be an eifin of shalom. So the Rebbe explained the pasuk as the Ranat and the Tafshin Dalet explained it. And then the Rebbe says, wait a minute, there's another explanation. And again, I think the Rebbe builds it, in his mind, it's built on the Mitler Rebbe's Pada BiShalom, which goes on the pasuk directly. At least also, not just on the pasuk with the Gemara. Although in the Gemara, the three Madreges, the pasuk by itself is Pada BiShalom. And that's why Shalom is first, because Shalom goes on Torah, and on Torah changes Gemas Chasadim and Tefillah. My outstanding kasha would be that Afilim Timtza Lema, that there's a second pshat in Pada BiShalom, that Torah changes the Tefillah and the Tzedakah. According to that, shouldn't the Seder be Pada BiShalom, not Pada BiShalom Ki B'Rabim Hoye Madi? First you should have Torah, then you should have Gemilas Chasadim, and then you should have Tefillah. No, first you should have Torah, then you should have Tefillah, then Gemilas Chasadim, as the Gemara says. How come in the pasuk, in the Gemara, it's Torah, Gemilas Chasadim, and Tefillah? And of course, the simple teretz is because Torah and Gemilas Chasadim are both included in the word Shalom. So they included in the word Shalom, they have to go together. But there has to be a better teretz for why the Seder is Torah, Gemilas Chasadim, and Tefillah, even though the Rebbe is saying that the Seder Ha'elam is Torah, Tefillah, and Gemilas Chasadim. So that's the issue. That the first level of this Mamer sees three levels of Milchama, and the second level of Mamer says the other two levels are all raised up, being Madrega of Shalom, and all three are Eifin of Shalom. And you turn to page 48 and you find the answer. And of course the answer is going to be, as I told you in the last shir, the Madrega of Toraso Umnaso. Bottom of page 48, V'zehu kol le'esek b'teira. This is why the pasuk begins with the word Pada. And the Gemara begins with the word esek b'teira. Zuhi haschala, the Gimel Hanyanim, is the beginning of all three things of Teira, Ved, and Gemilas Chasadim. And this is Nesinas Keach, it gives strength, to every single Jew, to fulfill his purpose in this world. And of course, it can be done on two levels. The lower level is that the Torah gives a koyach for the Tefillah, to be done with Derech Cherev Shel Shalom, and for the Gemilas Chasadim, to be done with Derech Milchama, or to, like the Rebbe said, to have Bichlal Masayim Mona, that because of the Torah, the Tefillah and the Gemilas Chasadim are also Madrega of Shalom. And he explains that it all starts with Torah. And Inyans and Nifal, this all begins before the baby is even born, as the Gemara says, the entire Torah must be, and Esav Chulu is given koiches to be Makayim Kol Torah Kula. And of course, Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, the Mashpia is Lashon Shvua. They make him swear that he's going to do the right thing and not the wrong thing. And the Tzemach Tzedek adds Gami Lashon Seva, the person is sated with koiches. The take and be bold the moment one is born. He has first Alim learns the whole Teda as in the Sinas Koyach for Avoid. And afterwards, by the number 18, Abaisai. 4 lines from the bottom, page 48, Maschil Hemshech Avidas, begins the life of Avoida. That it comes down into the other 2 levels of Avoida. Cherev Shel Shalom, which is Tefillah, which is called B'charbi, B'kashi, it says in Targum Unkelis, in Vayechi, B'tzleisi, B'usik Yadua, and then you have Gemilas Chasadim, which is Achila, the Nama Pum Char B'lechel. So on the first level, the Teda gives a koyach that I should be able to fight the Cherev Shel Shalom and fight the Cherev Shel Muhammad Tefillah Gemilas Chasadim. But on the second level, the Pirush Hasheni, which is, I guess, the Pirush HaPoshet. If you don't use the Gemara, just read the Pasuk Pada BiShalom Nafshi Mikravli by itself. It's how because of Teda, Daved, Gemilas Chasadim, are also an Eifin of Shalom. So the Rebbe continues by the number 19, and he said, the redemption of my soul is peaceful. And not only in the third of my life, which is connected to Torah, but in the rest of my life as well. The Tmura said that instead of the fact, that there could be a need to fight an actual war, which is the inyan of Gemilas Chasadim. Instead of the fact Yochali is top of 49 now. Cherev Shel Shalom, the need to demonstrate strength, as it's called. Not to fight a war, but to show power, to prevent fighting war, which is called Cherev Shel Shalom, which is in Yinat Tefillah. Says the Rabbi Kivan she'asik b'Teda, because the Yid is learning Teda on a madrega which is called asik. And now he adds the key words, be'efin shenase Toraso Umnaso, on the level where Teda is business. So then you have B'chal Masayim Mana, the Tedas, or Toraso Umnaso, is the 200 that includes the 100, and then not only have 3 Darki Havoida and 3 Darki Shalom, but all 3 are in the Madrega Pada BiShalom Nafshi. Now Toraso Umnaso, the Gemara says, is rare, right? Harbi Asa Rabbi Shimon also Yadam, Harbi Asa Rabbi Shmuel, also Rabbi Shimon's avoid the Toraso Umnaso is very special. And the Rebbe is going to explain it, but I'll just say Avodat before we begin to read. Toraso Umnaso doesn't mean that I learn Torah all day long. Toraso Umnaso means I learn Torah, and from Torah I have Parnasa. I learn Torah, and from Torah I have my connection to the Eibishter. Normally we say that if you want a connection to Hashem, you have to daven. Aveda Shabalev. Torah alone does not connect you to the Eibishter. Torah is Chachmas Shalach Kadosh Baruch Hu. But if you want a connection to the Eibishter, you have to have Tefillah Bazunder. But then you have a Yid that from his Torah the connection to the Eibishter happens, like it's mentioned in Tanya from Rabbi, that his Limud Torah was Kebeini Amispawel Kol Hayom, his Torah, the mouse at Tefillah. In other words, even though Torah is Ayin from Seichel, but when you learn Torah in a Madrega of Toraso Umnaso, the connection that you forge with Hashem through davening is forged through Torah directly. And the same is true with Parnasa. Toraso Umnaso means I learn Torah on the Eibishter sends Parnasa. The example that the Rebbe is going to bring is the Ma'aseh with Rabbi Shimon in the rain. But you have the Gemara with Rabbi Shimon, that he learned Torah and his Parnasa and his medicine was provided with Derech Nes by other people without him having to put his finger in cold water. Because that's Toraso Umnaso. So Toraso Umnaso means not just the Infant Kamos, that I'm learning Torah all day long, Toraso Umnaso means the Infant Echos, that in my Torah there is the connection to Hashem of Tefillah, and in my Torah, it gives me Parnasa B'Gashmias, right? In other words, in contrast to what it says in Tanya Kud Sachrin, it gets like Kiddush, L'Hav Mashchas Piyetz Chaim, which I think we're finishing today, in Chitas. That only Tefillah changes it B'Gashmias and Torah and Mitzvos don't. Toraso Umnaso is different. Toraso Umnaso, the Torah alone gives me physical Parnasa, and the Torah alone gives me emotional connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is why a person who's Toraso Umnaso doesn't earn Parnasa, the Parnasa comes from his Torah, and a person who's Toraso Umnaso doesn't have to daven because his connection to the Eibush comes from the Torah itself. So it's an echasdik thing. Said in different words, Toraso Umnaso is the Madrega B'chol Meidecha. It's an echos of connection to Hashem, which is an infinite love. You love Hashem so much that the love shows itself not just in your heart and not just in your body, but in your wealth. And the person who's in that madrega from the Torah comes all of his gashmizik needs. So a person is oisik b'Torah in a madeg of Toraso Umnaso. So then his tefillah, that means the connection to the Eibush, which is represented by tefillah, is not b'derech shas tleisa shas krova cherev shel shalom. It's also shalom. And even his gemilas chasadim, which means the bitter of the Gashmi is like a world, which is mamish milchama, is not through milchama. It's from Torah alone. Malachtecha nasa sayedei achedim. Now the only piece of this puzzle which is imperfect is that a person of Toraso Umnaso is still mechoyev to do mitzvahs. But which is a different discussion. But his bitter of Gashmias happens simply from his limud Torah. And that's what the Rebbe is saying. The first pshat in the pasuk is that there's 3 ways to win a war. And the second way is that all 3 are an eifin upon the BiShalom through Eisek B'Torah. And we continue, second line without page 49, it's explained in many places in Chassidus. And he's been signed to the Bach also. Eisek. Someone is preoccupied with learning Torah, rather than someone who's learning Torah who knows Torah, because the meaning of the word Asik is like a businessman, right? An employee goes to work on time, works all day long, he finishes his day, goes home and he sleeps. The businessman can come late, and maybe he doesn't work all day long, but he doesn't sleep because of their business, because it's his, mein Tate. And when a person is Oisik B'Torah, is learning Torah because that's his business, he's Eichet to the Madrega Toraso Umnaso. V'shchola Oisik B'Torah hainu. Someone who's preoccupied with Torah means that Kol Ma'ayone, his whole fountain, his whole power is in Torah. And moreover, this is his business, this is his this is his profession, this is his vocation, this is how he makes a living. How do you make a living through limud Torah? D'shtamish b'taga shtei kach v'kach. That you learn Torah and push it melach t'chanasa zayidei acher. And he gives you the example from RaShbI. He's going to bring 2 RaShbIs. The first one is in a bracket, and the second one is in the pnim. Like it says in the Gemara. About Rabbi Shimon and his friends. That the Gemara says, but Rabbi Shimon was able to do it. That he didn't daven every day. That's mafik. He didn't daven every day. He davened once in 30 days, like Rabbi Yehuda. That we finish Kol Limude, which is Hoya Esla Inat Filim Mitlas and Yemen, Tlas and Yemen every 30 days. Palteil Zebed RaShbI. Valachas Kama Vakama Kavur BiShalom V'Lei made RaShbI Shemasikin Lasses Sukkah V'Lasses Lulav. The Mitzayim to the Ben Yenim Brachas, which said that Reb Shimon davened once a year, not once a Chodesh, but once a year. Beneged to mitzvahs, like the halacha is that you do mitzvahs. I don't know Beneged to RaShbI. I remember a Mamer from the Rebbe, from the Mems. I remember the Rebbe saying it, that when Reb Shimon was in the Maida, he wasn't able to become mitzvahs either. So the Rebbe holds that this Reb Shimon was not become mitzvahs, it was not because he wasn't able to, but because there's a higher madeg of Toraso Umnaso, which is even potter from mitzvahs. I don't know what the Rebbe means here, but for sure there's an inyan and not davening because of Toraso Umnaso. And then the Rebbe says, and this affects, if a person is learning Torah and a madeg of Toraso Umnaso, and like I explained before, that this is an inyan pnimi. It's an inyan of b'chol meidecha, in other words, learning Torah and physically changing the world, which is an extraordinary level of learning Torah. Then, the idea that you go through the world in a way that it's peaceful, that the light of Elokus makes the world the way it needs to be. The cholon yonim nasn davke, everything happens ways in Torah. That your tefillah, the connection to the Eibush, that happens in a way of Torah, and your bitter of the world also happens in a way of Torah without any mechama whatsoever. And the example that he gives is from Geshem, from rain, and he gives the second example from RaShbI. If you want to affect rain through davening, like the story with the Gemara, the Mishnah, the Gemara, Masechta Tanis B'cheni Amago, Oz EF Shaladas Be'efen Geshem. You can't be sure if you're going to get the rain precisely as you want it. It could be Be'efen the tipin drops, which is not sufficient, or Be'efen the Rev Shaman V'Rev Teva, which is a deluge and destroys the world. And only the third time around, you have to control them, that it should be rain, which is Efen of Yishmei Brach. And the reason for this is that the rain is being brought about to the avodah of a person, and the person is b'medida v'agbala. So there's a struggle between the Elokus and the world, between heaven and the earth. So Saif Kal Saif, you bring the Eibush to the bracha into the earth, but it's what you call Tefillah, Cherev Shel Shalom, which is the story about Cheni Amaga, is brought in the one of Lag BaEmer. Mashen can that is Geshama dealing with that Torah. Then Rabshim Bayachai, Zim Nachad Itzach Amal Lemit. Again, this is the Mamer of Lag Ba'omer, that Rabshim Bayachai didn't even know what they wanted. He just thought that they needed something. And his Talmidim praised him. They gave him Shvachim. And he said Torah on the Pasuk in Yamata Manoim Shavazacham Gam Yachad, and it rained precisely. The Oz are a Kamei Shahoya RaShbI, like the story of RaShbI. Sha'oma Teir al hine matav manoim shavasacham gam yochad. It's a Teir on the pasuk hine matav manoim shavasacham yochad. The ozarei biyad yardu gishbei bracha. The rain was immediately correct. Umavu erbaruch and memorim explain. Hachil ibn Aved as RaShbI v'Aved as Chenia Magal. Different between Rabshim Bayachai is making it rain through Torah, and Chenia Magal is making it rain through Tefilla. Let's pause. Most people cannot change the world through Torah. Most people can only change the word through tefillah. Like it says at the beginning of the Hemshech B'Tchaim in Tanya. Tefillah can change the world, but Torah cannot. But Toraso Umnaso can. And when Toraso Umnaso affects the change in the physical world, it happens from a Torah point of view. It's exactly what the world needs, and it never happens wrong, because the whole thing is coming Mamayla Lamata. And that's the Pshat, BiShalom Nafshi, that the Torah affects, that the Tefillah connection with the Eibishter. And the Mitzvos, that means the beat of Gashmis connection with the Eibishter, is all happening with Derech Torah when you're Madrega of Toraso Umnaso. And this is the second Madrega, BiShalom Nafshi. The Shnei Inyonim, Harehem Nasim Chelik Ma'ateiru, are both of these levels, and Drachim. That of Chenia Magal, and that of Rabshim Bayachai are both part of Torah. And Chenia Magal is considered the lower Madrega, and Rabshim Bayachai is considered the higher Madrega. Chenia Magal did it through Tefillah, and Rabshim did it through Torah. First of all, we're for sure not Rabshim Bayachai, we're not even Chenia Magal. Who could be Og Uga and threaten the Eibush that I'm not stepping out of the circle to the rains? If Chenia Magal, he was no posh to Yid, Chenia Magal. Lived in this man of the Zugis. They never once mentioned in a Mamer that it says in Seder Adela that it's possible Chenia Magal lived in the time of the first Beis HaMikdash. Although it's widely accepted, lived in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, but before, in the time of the Zugis, before Hillel and Shammai. He was a great, great man. And his Madrega was, quote, only Tefillah, end quote. But what does it do with me and you? And Allah has come of a Kama RaShbI that's even higher. It says, Rabbi, Chenia Magal opened up this pathway of davening to the Eibishter and making it rain. And Rabshim Bayachai opened up the pathway of making it rain through Limudat Torah. The idea already exists. Each person. A trace of it. As Chassidus says, that everything that we hear about is and since these stories were told to us, and it's a siman that these are yonim of changing the world through tefillah, and even changing the world to Limudat Torah. Toraso Umnaso has a connection to each one of us. So what does that mean practically? The Rebbe, when he spoke about Toraso Umnaso, used to say that for the half an hour that you learn, there's no telephone, there's no world, it's Toraso Umnaso and Eichos. But this is the second Madrega part of BiShalom. The first Madrega part of BiShalom is that there's 3 levels of Shalom, Cherev, Shalom, and Melchama. And the second is Toraso Umnaso makes all 3 into Shalom. And now the Rebbe finishes. And you can talk about our Rabbeim and repeat again the 2 steps. This is also in general, this in a part of BiShalom, make sure wait till the see Yisrael was by the Rabbeim. And the part of BiShalom happens at the Avedasam Lifnei. They go through both levels. First, they go to the level of Avodah, where Zman Teda L'chud, and Zman Tefillah L'chud, and Zman Mitzvos L'chud. And then they reach the Madrega of Toraso Umnaso. In the Eisik, B'Teda, they were involved in Limudat Torah, Ubegmil, Es Chasadim, U'Mispalo, L'Matziber. And the impression that the Rebbe wants to give is that it wasn't all done by Derech Torah. All wasn't all done Toraso Umnaso. Torah was Shalom, and Mils Chasadim was Melchama, U'Mispal L'Matziber was Cherev Shalom. V'Haraya, Ki Yadua, Kama Takonis. We see many enactments. Shahayu Eitel Kvei Kedushas Morazakin that Alter Rebbe had Lifnei HaMaiser before he was arrested. In other words, before he said the pasuk Padei BiShalom, like he writes in the Gersa Kedesh about tzedakah. V'hi she'amda lanu lifnes nafsheinu, that tzedakah protects us and redeems us. V'alderach ze bekame igres. V'alderach ze avidasa binyan Torah. That before he was arrested, he also has the Ian of Torah, but even the Eisik B'Torah, like you have in the Gersa Kedesh Katenti about the Gersa Kedesh Peschem Ebracha, Batzia, Mashas, and so on. And al derech zeh, la'achar zeh, gavayt tzatfilah. So you have how the Alter Rebbe, before he was arrested, had Torah l'chud, Tefilla l'chud, and Gemilas Chasadim l'chud. He spoke about giving tzedakah, and he did not indicate that giving tzedakah is shalom, it's milchama. He spoke about tefillah, which is cherev shel shalom, and he also spoke about limud ha-Torah, but limud ha-Torah on the madrege, which does not change the Gemilas Chasadim and the tefillah. And then he went to jail, and he came out of jail. It was that Paul, Shiach Paul de BiShalom. And Paul de BiShalom means that now the Torah is different. And the Torah is so different that the tefillah is different and the Gemilas Chasadim are different. And this is then drawn. Since by the Rebbe the Nasi there was. In the Pasach he opened up the gate. And he's trampled out the road for each one of us. At safe kol data, so it becomes a lesson for each one as the Mashiach comes. And at the first level, there has to be kol esig b'teiro, gemilas chasadim, espalim atzibur, as three separate avodas, which is shalom and cherev shalom and milchama. And ultimately, poyalim, you reach a higher madrege, does yepad b'shalom, nafshe ve'evin shal shalom, that you reach a madrege of Toraso Umnaso, that your Torah is in such a high madrege of shalom, that afilu cherev shal shalom le'sava b'yartzechem. There's no demonstration of power. In other words, tefillah, connection to the Eibush in your heart, is all through Torah. Toraso Umnaso through Shalom. V'nasati Shalom ba'adas Eibush to place the Shalom and land tachal the same as Shalom. And again, we have to assume that the Rebbe is implying that after the Alter Rebbe went out of jail, his tefillah and his Gemilas Chasadim were all the nation of Shalom. And the Rebbe is saying it's a hero. We start out our lives as three madrigas of avodah, and you graduate to Toraso Umnaso. And he finishes with the following statement: La'achar eze naseh kilu pada'ani kayachol. You redeem even the Eibush himself. Li ulabad and bein umes ha'elam. First of all, b'chaf adim and ki'ilu, and then it's pada'ani kipshute b'zman ha'galos because of Mashiach. That in the times of Galos it's ki'ilu pada'ani. In other words, we're still in Galos, but within the parameters of Galos, Toraso Umnaso raises us as individuals above the Galos. And of course, you want to add here what the Rebbe says in the Vata Tetzaveh, that it says the Hill said in the name of the Alter Rebbe that there are tzaddikim l'gabi whom the Beis Hamikdash was not destroyed, kamei RaShbI, and this yid whose l'gabi whom the Beis Hamikdash is not destroyed is able to hold by the avoid of Toraso Umnaso, but the fact that it's only by him and not by somebody else is a raya that it's not the highest madrege of shalom. It's not the highest madrege of being megal alakus in the world, because by somebody else it isn't, and therefore you have to have it becomes hakdama ukeli. To without the chafadimya, when the whole world is redeemed, and the idea of gili alakus negel etzem mitzvos ikim mitzvos is b'chol ha'elam kuli b'shava, then it's not ki'ilu but it's padani mamish. Begula mitas v'ashleima the Mashiach said kenu ba'gola ditan. So the chayir this is the remes. Ki'ilu means in RaShbI personally you have Toraso Umnaso. In RaShbI personally, you have Toraso Umnaso in a madrega that is tefillah and its stuck is also a madrega of shalom, but it's only ki'ilu because it's only in one place, and it becomes padani b'li chaf adimyan when the isgalos of Melech HaMashiach happens at b'chol mokum b'elam. So I gave you a second class. This class was a shorter class. I mean, probably 40 minutes. I don't know exactly how long it wasn't very long. I hope two things. I hope, number one, I taught it correctly, and I hope, number two, that I taught it clearly. And by dividing it up into two, I framed it in such a way I think, I hope.